Thank you so much for being here today. We are in a series on biblical giving. The latter part of these series of videos is focused exclusively on the promised offering mentioned in scriptures. Sometimes our churches call this grace giving. Other times we call it the faith promise missions offering. Some churches just refer to it as the missions offering. But no matter what it is to which you're giving in the promised offering, this is the biblical model, we want you to be able to watch and learn. So what we have is a website. You can go to learnbiblicalgiving.com, watch any of the past ones. You can rewatch them, you can share them, you can duplicate them. You can take the resources that are available on that website. There are PDFs that you can download and fill in the blanks every week. And I want you to be able to have that. Share them on your Facebook or any of your social media outlets, promote them however you want. They are freely given, and the PDFs are freely available to you, and you can make as a bazillion copies if you want. And so today we're on our 9th lesson, and this is called the Promised Offering Explained to the Church at Corinth. So obviously, by saying Church at Corinth, I need you to go to the book of 1 Corinthians. And I want you to go to the very last chapter. I think this is one of my favorite passages from which to teach about the promised offering. Now, you notice I'm careful to say promised offering because that really is what the scriptural indication is. They made a promise to give. What were they giving for? The dearth, Acts 11:27 through 30. The famine that actually took place. What are we doing with our missions money? Well, we're giving that to missions, where our promised offering is going to missions. So when I say to you the promised offering, realize that that's how they gave it. You say, well, where is faith promise giving in the Bible? Well, if you've watched the previous videos in this series, you would see that phrase doesn't appear in the Bible, but the principle of faith is, and the principle of a Christian making a promise, and the principle of giving is surely there. So when you put those together, you see wrapped up in the promised offering is just that. So now I hope you found your place in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, because I really love to teach in this passage of Scripture. I'm going to read from verse number 1. Now, concerning the collection for the saints. You say, wow, Brother O'Malley, wasn't that like the term Paul used in Rome? Yes, it was. Last week we learned in Romans chapter 15 that he said it was the collection for certain saints at Jerusalem or the poor saints. And you remember how the Gentile churches were giving? Paul talked about it being a debtor to them, and it's good that they minister in carnal things. Well, this is that offering. Now, I know it's very tempting for preachers to make this any other kind of offering. But if we're going to stay with the context of this offering, 1 Corinthians 16 has to do with what the verse says, the collection for the saints. This is not the tithe. This is not the special project offering. This is not even the preferred offering. This is the promised offering. They were taking a collection up. Different churches, you say, even Corinth? Well, yes, even Corinth. You remember the churches of Macedonia included Philippi, Thessalonica, Cenchrea, as well as Athens, and then the church at Corinth. So now Paul writes, now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given order to the churches of Galatia. Now think about that for a minute. Paul is giving orders to the church. Well, not orders like you would think of in a military sense, but orders in the sense of structure. When a farmer lays out his crops, we would say his crops are in order. His corn is in a straight row, or the row that's the straightness of the row based on how he's going to harvest them. Or maybe a math teacher would stand in front of the classroom and write on the whiteboard and say, this is how you calculate the formula to get the answer. So Paul is saying, as I've given order, I laid out the crops for the church at Galatia. I wrote the problem on the board and I showed them how to solve the problem. So Paul said, I'm giving you instructions for this. Keep going. And he says, I've given order to the churches of Galatia. Watch these last 4 words now. Even so, do ye. So This is not just a one-off church in Antioch of Syria. No, not at all. This is the churches of Galatia, as well as the churches of Macedonia and Achaia. And we have even more churches involved in it as that. And now he said, like they are doing it, you do it. Verse 2. Upon the first day of the week. Well, that's pretty clear. You say, well, we don't go to church on Mondays. Well, Monday isn't the first day of the week. Sunday's the first day of the week. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you, well, that's pretty plain spoken, isn't it? Let every one of you lay by him in store. We're going to come back to that. As God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. And when I come, whomsoever ye shall approve by your letters, them will I send to bring your liberality unto Jerusalem. And if it be meet that I go also, they shall go with me. Well, there's a lot here, and we'll work through each one of these things. In fact, I have 7 things for you. You should see in your notes the handouts that you've gotten. If you don't have those, go to learnbiblicalgiving.com and you'll be able to get the PDF for every single video that we have. There's a PDF handout for it. But there's 7 things on your points today, and I want you to see what they are. First of all, I want you to see the structure of the offering. What's the structure of the offering? Well, we talked about that a moment ago. Paul said it was a collection for the saints. And he said, as I've given order to the churches of Galatia, even so do ye. So now we realize this. Paul gave them an order, a way that it is done. This offering, we use it for missions. They used it for the collection for the saints, for those who were starving saints in Jerusalem. He said, now I've given order to those churches, and I want you to do the same thing. So they're structured here. It's not some haphazard thing. We have a biblical model, and we follow that model. And that model is that we make a promise to give, and then we give in that offering. Now, when I read this, I want you to see it's not done whimsically. It's not done haphazardly. It's done by intention. My wife and I, we give to the promised offering at our church. And we fill out a card every year that says our family will be giving this. In fact, if I can fully disclose to you, my wife will fill out a card and I will fill out a card. Say, both of you give? I believe in giving to missions. I believe in giving to the promised offering. And there's structure to it. I turn that card in and I mark how old I am and how much I'm giving and how often I'm giving it. Why? There's a structure to it. Paul laid it out like a mathematician would lay it out, like a farmer would lay out his crops. What do? We make a promise every year by faith to give in order for souls to be reached with the gospel. Why did they give? The famine. Why are we giving? You could play with your words a little bit and say a famine of the gospel, and that's fully acceptable. But we use our giving to get the gospel out around the world. I believe we sow in dollars and we reap in souls, or you sow in the currency of your country and you reap in souls. So the first thing I need you to see, it's a structured offering. Here's the second thing. I've given you 7 things, so this is your second one. I want you to realize that it's a Sunday offering. You say, what do you mean a Sunday offering? Go back to verse 2. When do we give this offering? Upon the first day of the week. Well, that's Sunday. That's pretty clear. Now, you say, well, I don't get paid every week. Well, that's fine, but you can have faith every week. And you say, well, Brother O'Malley, I get paid once a month. That's when I receive support as a missionary. I receive support once a month. But we give our amount based on our faith or our capacity, and we give it on Sunday. Well, where do I put it? Well, that's at church. We put our money in. You say, well, I do electronic deposit. It'll be fine. Just go ahead and give it. When I see this, I realize it's a Sunday offering, a time that was designated to give. Number 3, I want you to see it's a specified offering. You say, what do you mean by specified? Well, it's not an offering that's tied to an occupation, and it's not an offering that's tied to an income. It's not a gift that is given that is tied to a gender. nor is it a gift or an offering that's tied to a role in the family. This is an offering that I think is for kids too. Notice what it says, let every one of you. Well, that's not vague at all, is it? We have a structured offering, we have a Sunday offering, and we have a specific or specified offering. And that means that everybody can give. You say, well, Brother O'Malley, you think kids can give? I think if you don't teach kids to give, how are they going to know to give later? It's our responsibility to teach our children to give now. So later in life, when we're off the scene and if the Lord has not returned, that our kids know we give to God. You remember it goes back to one of the four tent poles of missions giving. What's the four tent poles? We have the prescribed offering, the preferred offering, the project offering, and this, the promised offering. And when we look at the breakdown of this, it's a specified offering. I think everyone should give. When our son John lived at home, we had him fill out a card too. He said, well, if my kid gives, I'm just going to have to back that offering up. That's one more way I'm having to give. Well, maybe you don't understand. We want your kids to learn how to give by faith. So when we teach them to give, you fill out the card. You say, well, how are they going to know what to put on there? You're the parent. Guide them in that and teach them how to give. In fact, we'll talk about more in this next point. And I want you to see here back in verse 2. So it's a Sunday offering, it's a specific offering or specified offering. And then notice these phrases. He says, let every one of you, watch these words now, lay by him in store as God hath prospered him. That's pretty amazing. What does it mean to lay by him in store? Kim, my wife, when her grandmother, her father's mother, was alive, she lived in a state called Georgia, West Georgia, and she lived in a town called LaGrange. She lived on a street that was kind of up a hill. And so as you crested the hill, that was Grandmama's house. Now, to go inside Grandmama's house, it was just a mill village house, not very palatial in any means. It was just a simple home. And you go inside there, and Grandmama Trenton lived there. You go inside, and Grandmama had her whole thing. She was just an amazing woman for herself. She sold Avon, a product here in the United States for ladies and men of skincare products and such. She sold that until just before she passed away, as well as she had other things going on in the house. And she had an interesting thing that she did. I was there one day, and Kim's grandmother closed the blinds. She drew the blinds down. I thought, okay, what's happening? And then she said she was going to get her money. Well, she went over to the clothes dryer and pulled out her purse. And in her purse was a box of envelopes. Now think about that. A box of envelopes inside her purse, inside the electric clothes dryer. So now she has that purse out. She's put it on the table. She pulls out the box of envelopes. And in all of those envelopes, she had things marked down for which she was going to pay her bills. So she would put her money in the different envelopes and be able to say, okay, that's for my utilities, and that is for my groceries, and this is for my tithe, and this is for the different things to which she gave. This, what Grandmama did, was she put her money in store. Now I had to ask Grandma, and I said, Grandma Trenton, why are you putting your purse in the dryer? I'm thinking, how many times in an electric clothes dryer do you lose your socks? And here she is putting her purse inside the clothes dryer with the box of envelopes in it with money in it. And she said to me, John, when a thief breaks in the house, do they ever look in the clothes dryer? And I said, you got me, Grandmama. No, they don't look in the clothes dryer. But what was she doing? She was practicing this phrase in the verse Paul wrote. Now, I'm not saying that Grandmama got the idea from Paul. A lot of people use an envelope system. But what she did was she was laying by her in store. You say, well, how does that work for missions giving? Well, I would encourage you to do the same thing. As you go through the course of the week looking for how God is going to supply your faith promise offering, get an envelope. Maybe even get a little journal to say, you know what? I saved money at the grocery store this week and I saved $7 here. And I went to the gas pump and I ended up saving $1 over here. And then I had a coupon over at the other store and I used that. And all of a sudden, my $15 a week I've gathered and I wrote it in a little journal and I put the money in the envelope so I could show up for the structured Sunday offering because it's specified that I give it, and I laid by in store as God prospered me. And that brings me to my next point. It's not just a specified offering or a stored offering, it is also a supplied offering. Who gives to me so I can give to missions? Well, that's God. He said, as God prospers you. It is God who supplies our giving. It is God who supplies our needs. So notice what he says. As God has prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come. You say, what's a gathering? Is that a group of people? No, but if you've ever been late on something, then you know what this is about. Rushing around at the last minute. Paul's coming. Got to get our promised offering in there. We said we were going to give and we didn't give. And so let's get rushed around at the last minute. Paul said, just lay by yourself in store. Give it on Sunday. Put it in there. Get the accounting of it done and get your promise fulfilled. You know, these verses make complete sense when you understand that this is the collection for the saints. And then in verse number 3, I want you to see this. And when I come, so Paul said, I'm coming. And when I come, whomsoever ye shall approve by your letter. Now, if you remember last week's lesson from Romans 15, I talked to you about how churches appointed delegates or messengers to come from their church to go to Jerusalem. And Paul talked about that. And he said, whomsoever ye shall approve, here in verse number 3. So by your letters, meaning a letter could be written from the church at Corinth to Paul and to the church of Jerusalem to say, we approve Jim and Bob to go to Jerusalem with our money. Here's the amount of money that we've given. And he says, them will I send to bring your liberality unto Jerusalem. So there's the picture of it. The starving saints in Jerusalem need financial assistance. More than 20 churches in the New Testament makes a promise to give to that church back at Jerusalem so they could have it. They have a certain period of time to get the money together, and when they get the money together, they send a delegate with Paul. Now think about financial integrity. It's pretty much incredible to think that rather than Paul just handle it all and say they gave, they sent delegates as well. And then he says in verse 4 what he also said in Romans 15. He's going to try to go to Jerusalem and bring people with him to certify or seal the fruit. And now he says, and if it be meet that I go also. So at this point, Paul may not be sure that he's going with them, but either way, the delegate from the church would go. You see, when we talk about no gatherings when he comes, that's a sincere offering. An offering that's just saying, we got it together and we gave it. And I love the financial accountability that is here as well. So group leaders, pastors, teachers, whoever is here in the room with us watching this video, I want you to talk about this lay by him in store. Maybe your group has some ideas like Grandmama Trenton had. Now, I'm not saying put your missions offering in the clothes dryer. What I am saying is to maybe get an envelope and a notebook and imagine the testimony journal you would have after a year's time of saying, I was over here and I was expecting to pay this full price, and all of a sudden I got a discount, and that was my faith promise for the week. Maybe you need to talk about that. Maybe you could set up an example there, write it on the board, or have it printed out where you could say, this is my journal of God's blessings. So remember, when you want to see more videos, go to learnbiblicalgiving.com and you can get the handout sheets, watch all the videos if you want, and just learn what the Bible says about giving. Until next week, thank you for watching.